Hey, everybody. So, welcome to the Producer Rachel Show. This interview you're about to see with Timm Chiusano, he was on my bucket list. When I started to make lists of people in my life that I know, like, and trust that I wanted to do interviews with, he was the first one outside of that list of the people that are creators that I don't personally know. And so when I realized he was going to be at VidCon and we had planned a trip to go, my husband and myself, because I wanted to sort of see what is this all about? How can I network? How can I stay within this realm of content creation? And especially since I decided to double down on YouTube, I wanted to learn all the things I needed to know. And he was going to be there. And so I made it a point to make sure I was in a matchmaking session with him and then also went to some of his panels. And so I made my ask in the matchmaking session. I just straight up at the end when he was wrapping up, I just said, "Hey, I'd love to interview for my podcast. Is that something that you would be interested in doing?" Because I know he mentors people. He answers people's questions. He does say yes to certain people. He gives of himself. And so I figured, hey, why not just ask? And so I did. And he said yes. He told me how to contact him. And we went through that process and I hadn't heard back from a while. It took a couple weeks and I was getting discouraged because I thought, oh, he just did the thing of like, contact me through this email that I'm not going to check and, maybe we'll blow you off. And we'll figure it out, or we'll figure it out. I didn't know. I end up getting too much in my head about things like that, where I have to just sort of let it go. Just let it go. Let it go. I made the ask. If he can make it work, we have to trust the universe. But he responded, his team responded, and we made it work. He made it work. And that was today in beautiful form. We ended at 11 a.m., which I think is amazing. I stopped the recording portion a little earlier and asked him, hey, can I just keep you a little bit to ask you a couple of questions? And so this is the record portion. I try to sort of ask questions that I don't feel like he's addressed before. I also really try to just be in the moment and not try to ask all these prepared questions, right? I really hope you appreciate this conversation with me and Timm Chiusano. Just going over my notes, but I want to try to just have a regular conversation with you.
Cool.
So good morning. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate this so much.
Of course.
So for those that don't know, can you give me the elevator speech or the elevator pitch of who Timm Chiusano is now?
Who I am now? I am a dad that had spent the past 20 years in corporate America, 11 at a executive level at a Fortune 100 company, where I got subjected to all of the things that anybody would be scared of, but lucky enough to learn along the way, and fell backwards into a bit of social media, whatever you want to call it, which opened up a whole bunch of new doors for me. So I'm now self-employed and trying to sort my way through this new world. At the same time, got a book deal at the end of last year, which is something I'm actively wrapping up this month, and trying to be as helpful as humanly possible in a broader capacity, whether that's just seeing your days differently or not being as scared of your career, or how to navigate being a new parent while working full-time career stuff. The things that I unintentionally started to show up on people's radars for, I'm trying to make the most of that and pay forward the gift of the audience giving me, which led to me not having to have a full-time job anymore.
Well, I was going back through some of your content, and it seemed like you've almost manifested this. Like you kind of knew, even when you started posting content, the goal seemed to really be, how can I be a stay-at-home dad and spend more time with my daughter, Evelyn?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that would be my goal going back to when I was 27 years old. And remember a time period where my wife was making more than me and her career was starting to really take off. And it was funny because I remember my dad didn't love hearing me say it. I don't know why. I think it might have just been like old school machismo or God knows what. But yeah, I was always like, if I don't have to have a job, why in the world would I want a job? Like, why would I want to do this? Why would I want to subject myself to this all the time? Why wouldn't I want to just be a human being and help out, raising a child and doing whatever else? And that ended up not being the case. And I am pleased that I was able to utilize what I think is a core strength of mine, which is just the ability to be a good people leader and learn from that. But yeah, for sure, like once this started to pick up momentum, there was always something in the back of my head of like, oh, if this would be a ticket to getting back to where I wanted to go, that would be amazing. I always joked around that an ideal goal, especially once the corporate thing started to take off, and I was like, okay, I don't know how, you know, I don't really want to go down this path forever. The goal was if I only had to take the G train to get to work, that would be some sort of symbol of I've figured out a way to do this without being so heavily reliant on a corporate job, because the G train is the only train in New York City, for those that know, that doesn't actually go into Manhattan. And there's a G train by myself, so there's by my house. So I thought, like, if my commute means a G train to, Clinton Hill or Bed-Stuy or Williamsburg or whatever, that would inadvertently mean that I had figured out how to not have to go into Manhattan every day, which is the telltale sign of being a corporate commuter.
Well, I left corporate America, I guess you could say. I was working for a morning radio show for iHeartMedia, which is corporate America, right? It's a corporation. After having worked for other corporations for 20 plus years, I left right when COVID hit because my kids were home for school. They couldn't go to school anymore. My husband's job was shifting because of COVID. And I sort of just looked around and said, like, my kids are 9 and 10.
Yeah.
I haven't been present. I always put my job first before everything. And it was kind of like, wow, if I could make this happen, if I could pivot from side hustling with clients, helping them make content, to doing that full time, I feel like it's really something I should do. And I just got to that point where I just didn't want to go back anymore.
Yeah.
I just wanted to do the thing, right? I just wanted to do the thing that I've been dreaming of doing. And so I did that 4 years ago. And I've been creating content more consistently lately. So welcome to the world of content creation outside of corporate America. How are you finding it? Are you stressed out? I mean, you're a little bit further along than other people are because you've been doing it way longer. You've been showing up consistently. You have sponsors. You've got brand deals. You're working with Night Media. So you left when you sort of had certain things in place that could stay in a lifestyle for you, correct?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I was arguably doing one, two, you could say that there were like 4 different jobs happening concurrently before I left corporate America, which was the day job. Then there's the job of just making organic content, right? Like that in and of itself is something that could be a job, because that leads to the brand deals, which is another job because those are handled totally differently. There's an entire set of back and forth, and obviously like signing up for what you're going to take on responsibility wise, and then all of the, hey, how about this idea? Cool, shoot it by this date. Like that can become, especially if you get 2 or 3, even just 2 or 3 deals happening concurrently, that can be a job in and of itself. And then there was the job of writing the book, and how that is just its entire own beast, and something I'm definitely learning a lot about, very much so in real time. So, I mean, I had all those things going, but I never had a content strategy. It was just, let me take random clips of myself during the day and then put together some sort of vlog of sorts the next day. And that was really it. And I was literally making it up off the top of my head, basically every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then almost in most cases, forgetting what I would put together by the time I would post it that afternoon. So I would not say I have a full content strategy yet. I'm just kind of fumbling through what makes the most sense. What do I have time for? Because as much as I've opened up a bunch of time for, from leaving the corporate job, the book is a tremendous amount of time as well. And I just didn't have the bandwidth, especially having left a team of, it's a 400 person marketing department. And I was one of 4 lead executives in the team, and knowing that they were not going to backfill my role, it was in a very complicated set of variables that I needed to put together so that I could exit the right way. This was not, hey, here's my 2 weeks and I'm out of here. This was about a year-long process of let me take 180 people and put them here, and let me have further conversations about what I can build in the short term, that led up to a final conversation sometime in early 24, where I told my, like, picked a date with my boss, and he was like, "You mean in 2025?" I was like, "No, man, this year it's got to happen. Like, or else I'm gonna fail on multiple fronts if this doesn't happen." So I spent so much time putting that together. I didn't spend any time like working on my own plan, so to
Mhm.
speak. I certainly, to your point, I had the brand deals and have night representation, etc. But hot mess from a content strategy perspective, but making progress on the book. So I mean, it all feels very much like a just kind of clumsy new baby giraffe that's just trying to figure out where their legs are kind of situation, and trying to not be frustrated with myself throughout all of that and feel like you're failing, because you're also trying to navigate what is it like to be at home now, and also not being in like, well, wait a minute, I used to go to an office on a consistent basis and that's where my work got done. And just because I'm home doesn't mean that, like, yes, I've tried to manifest this full-time dad thing, but at the same time too, like, I need to
You
work my
still have
ass
to
off.
show up and work,
Well,
right?
and I need to work my ass off probably tenfold now
Yes.
to make sure that this is a long-term sustainable thing.
You are a
So
brand. You're basically a solopreneur. What
yeah,
it is you are your full production team now, right? Like
yeah,
you
right,
shoot, you direct, you write, you edit, you do all the things. Whereas
yeah.
you had a team to do that before. Have you found it fascinating? Because I have, how the day goes by so much faster now that the time is yours.
Yeah, I would say it's just different. It's the different structure, and especially because when I left, I literally got on a plane that afternoon. Like, I walked out of the office, got home, dropped off my suit, grabbed my suitcase, and then we left for Oregon for my wife's birth. This was back in June.
Mm-hmm.
Left for Oregon for my wife's birthday. We were here for a handful of days, and I went straight to Vegas for the NHL awards, and then straight to VidCon, where I
Yep.
saw
Which is
you.
where we met.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
and then more house guests
So
for.
basically, what you're saying is the schedule's been run
It's
by to
been
dos right now
it's
while you're
been
trying to fit content creation in.
60 days ish that I've been gone, and I think the total is now 20 ish days of being on the road and 17 days at home with house guests. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's
Is
been.
there a date coming up, like when Evelyn goes back to school, that you feel like, okay, now we can start this process?
I would like to think so, but I'm also not saying that because I don't know what I don't know.
Because we
And
don't know,
I'm
right?
so focused. Like, I've got rolling super fast, like 2 chapters a week deadlines for the book that are here now. So, that's really, it's like, what do I need to say yes to in the short term? And then outside of that, just write the book and do your best to fumble through making some organic content that's reasonably
Mm.
helpful. And but like, um I'm almost not projecting too much. I know what the schedule could be like, should be like, and yes, like around school starting, that would make all the sense in the world. But right now it's just like, get through writing
Get
another
rolling with the book.
30,000 words in the next 14 days or so.
Well, because it's due soon, right?
Correct, end of the month.
Okay. Have you thought about adding more freelancers to your team? I know you outsource some of your long form editing on the YouTube channel. Have you
Mhm.
thought about outsourcing some of your short form editing to sort of free up more time?
I've thought about it, but not realistic in the short term. Plus, if I outsourced anything, I would want to almost like not outsource, but I would want to bring in help relative to the strategizing of things, like what makes the most sense. Like, next Tuesday, or, should Tuesdays be this kind of post to help in this kind of capacity?
Right. So
Um,
now micro niching down the content that you're doing,
Not
whereas
even,
like maybe one day is a vlog, another day is business content. Is that what you're trying to sort of
yeah,
figure out?
yeah, pretty much. I mean, and I mean, nuance of words, I don't know that I would call like it'd be more just being more intentional, right? Like,
Hmm.
I don't know what I'm going to post today. No idea. That's not smart. That's not sustainable. That's been a vortex I've been in since I walked out the door. There's certainly been days where I'm like, yes, okay, cool, I know, and I've got something in my back pocket, but um, and then it's also kind of that fine line too of, as a 46-year-old dude, like how much pressure or annoyance can I put on my own family too, of like, hey, can you help me out with this thing? Which goes
Mm-hmm.
back to your question of additional help. Short term, no, I just have to figure it out and get through this phase and see what happens next. But it'll be nice to get to a place where I can get some more help from a strategy perspective. So it's not just like, hey, Kelly, my wife, can you please listen to me just ramble off the top of my head for 20 minutes about these ideas? And her being like, I don't know what to say in return, but if that was helpful for you to say those things out loud, then great. But yeah, being in a place where it's like a bit more,
Mm-hmm.
strategic,
Well, it's
and I can kind of, build the right tent poles to just go and do versus make it up on the fly.
well, I mean, you see how your brand, your personal brand is growing. I mean, do you think it's funny that people call your ads commercials? Have you seen that in your
I have not.
comments?
It's funny.
You haven't?
I won't. I haven't opened up TikTok other than to post since Easter. I don't want to know any performance metrics. I don't want to read. Like I
Which is smart. I think that's smart as a creator.
yeah. It's fine. Like I feel bad a little bit because it's like people go there and they leave comments and they should have reasonable expectations that the creator is going to interact in some regard. And when I, had 5, 10,000 followers, I was incessant about making sure that every single comment got a response from me. And it wasn't because the comments weren't nice or anything along those lines. I mean, I've certainly had my moments where, posts landed in ways that I had never intended. And then, you're dealing with some things you never expected. But it was more of I just don't want to have in the back of my head, oh, that didn't perform well today. And then like thinking about other stuff. And so that's
It
been like a really
sidetracks you.
nice, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I had no idea that there was a commercials thing out there.
It's great. I mean, you're getting great feedback, FYI, and people love a commercial, which I think
Mm.
was adorable that people said it. Because I think that you do convert. Your opinion converts. I mean, I bought protein bars because you said they were your favorite, and I trusted you because you've eaten how many probably protein bars have you eaten and reviewed? Do you think
Probably 1,000.
since probably 1,000? Right?
Yeah,
I'm not going to do that, and so I
yeah,
have to trust that Tim did his due diligence and said, okay, that grenade bar, right? The
yep,
white chocolate and peanut butter grenade bar is the
yep,
best bar. And so
yep.
I bought it. I converted. I do think that your ad content converts. I truly do, which is probably
Mm.
why you're going to continue to be successful with the ads that you are doing, the sponsorship deal. So God bless you with that.
Thank you.
Um, are you finding it hard to balance everything though? Because now you are getting bigger. The brand is getting bigger. You've got the book deal. Once the book launches, there's going to be more on your shoulders
Hmm.
with interviews and promoting it. I mean, you don't just launch a book and then not talk about it.
Right, right.
So basically, is part of your strategy in your head going to include that as well? Or it's like let's cross that bridge when we get to it?
Cross it when we get to it. I mean, it's a way that I survived what I had to survive over the past, going through a significant merger between Time Warner Cable and Charter Communications and Bright House Networks. Everything that I like to say, and I firmly believe it, that I saw just about everything corporate America could throw at anybody, and the only way that I survived it was by being excruciatingly practical about what I can control and what I cannot control. And yes, you're 1,000% correct. All of those things are going to rear their head, and I'm going to have to figure out all of them and then some when they do. But in the short term, a I like to I don't know like what the best way to describe it is, but it's like I don't give myself that luxury of assuming that those things are going to be luxury problems of mine until I've earned them.
Mm-hmm.
So that means I have to write something that's good enough that's going to put me in that position, and I don't take that for granted. So that keeps me focused on like that may or may not happen. It's not a 100% guarantee. I could write a piece of crap and Penguin comes back and they're like, dude, what is this? And everything goes sideways. That's, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that that does not happen. And I'm very comfortable and confident in what I've got on paper already. But it makes it easy for me to just put on the blinders and be like, all I can do is be present right now. The only thing that matters is having this conversation and, hopefully providing whatever might be helpful and helps you with your podcast, helps the audience that's listening to this. That's all I can control right now. So that's all that I worry about. And that also it's, I think it's a smart way to go about a day, but at the same time too, there can be some downside to that where I don't know what I'm going to post later, but I also don't have to worry about that right this second. So I
I
keep
love
I
that.
keep blinders on.
I think that's great. There's a post that you had made, a video that you had made, because I was going through some of your old stuff just to sort of maybe understand you a little bit differently, where you were putting together a puzzle, and it was almost like the content was like puzzle pieces. Like you can see the individual puzzle piece, but you don't know what the big picture is yet. And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like that's sort of that space that you're in. And I kind of love that because I always think big picture. I don't focus on being in the moment and just being, which is one of my biggest problems. When we met at VidCon, you were in the middle of trying to tell me a story. You were signing an autograph, and I interrupted you because I couldn't just be in that moment. And I want to ask you, what was the story? You were telling me about, as you were signing the autograph, you had a moment, this like memory moment of, I think, being a younger kid practicing your autograph.
Hmm.
So funny. I used to as a kid.
And then sign that. This was collecting that for my daughter, so she has that. Was that the story that like you can recall, or you think that that's what you're about to tell me? Because that's
Maybe. But it's funny on the other side of it, I wouldn't. I'm sometimes in some cases I would remember the details of that, but in some cases I wouldn't because I would be more focused on what you were saying in return versus what I was saying or what
mhm.
was happening around me versus a point that I was trying to make, unless for some reason it was like super pivotal or actually brought like gravitas to the moment, which I don't think it did. I think it was just me having some sort of weird recollection. So
Yes.
um,
That's
I
why
don't
I think
know.
we just didn't go back to it, because it was just
Yeah.
a moment in time. But I think that what you're helping me do through your content is really start to learn to be in that moment, to stop looking at the big picture, because we don't really know what it's gonna be. Things change and pivot every day, and just to
Mm-hmm.
focus on the little puzzle piece. So thank you for that.
Hmm.
I really needed that reminder. My husband will tell you I have the hardest problem because I've planned events. I'm a planner. I'm a producer. So like we plan for all the things, good and bad. And so I don't live in the moment when it's happening, because in my head, I've already lived it 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
And so when it's unfolding, I don't enjoy the moment.
Hmm.
And so I'm just, even just with this, I'm trying to just be in this moment with you and listen to you and just have a real conversation. Part of what I wanted to talk about was meeting you at VidCon. I don't fangirl over people. I mean, I've produced Beyonce, Tom Cruise, like I've, smoked with Snoop Dogg. I've never once created fan art for anybody. I've
Hmm.
never once was like, I have to meet this man and ask him for an interview. Like, never once in my life has
Wow.
this like been a thing. And I know that there's this thing called parasocial relationships,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where we feel like we know content creators because they share so much of their lives. And you
Yep.
in particular share a lot of your life, and you also aren't scared to get vulnerable. Does it freak you out? Did it freak you out? I'm going to show you I'm going to show the artwork just in case people have no idea
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. But like, this is the artwork that I created,
Mm-hmm.
and I had him sign the shirt. It just came to my head of your POVs and like us watching you watching us, right? It was a whole thing that came to my head, and it fascinated me because I was like, why am I acting this way? What is it that about Tim that's like, I just have to meet this guy? And all I could think of was the parasocial relationship of feeling like I know you, even though I don't know you. Does it freak you out a little bit, or is there something accepting of you? I mean, you still walk around Brooklyn, you still
Mm-hmm.
go for your jogs. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
you meet more and more people now every day that are like, oh my God, hi, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Does it freak you out that you've been so open with your life, or
No, it doesn't. It makes. I mean, what you had created was incredibly sweet. I think it was the first piece of like physical fan art that I'd ever received in my life, which was amazing, and it's heartwarming, and it's grounding, and it's humbling, and it's all the things, because I can't in my head help but think of the process that went into it, right? Like not just kind of the moment and seeing it, but like the thoughtfulness and the idea, and then executing in the idea, and then packing it up and bringing it, and like on all of those things kind of go in my head, which makes me appreciate it that much more. And it also allows me to remove myself from like any of my own like specific thoughts in the moment, because I think it's more important to focus on the other person's thoughtfulness and then appreciate the steps that actually went into that, versus just like, anything else, or trying to figure out how to feel about something in a given situation. This is all super new to me still. Again, 46 years old, had never been recognized, so to speak, until within the past 3 years, I would say. And it's been amazing, especially in New York City. It's like made it that much more of a tight knit community, so to speak, where people will sit down next to me on the subway and just strike up a conversation with me, and not because they're bored, but because they have specific questions, or to your point, they feel like they know me. And everyone's been super polite for the most part, of respecting time and space and all of the things that could make something potentially weird. Nobody is made weird, with very, very, very
No one
few
just shows up at
exceptions.
your house,
Nobody just
right?
shows up at the
Like,
house.
I
Like,
love that. Thank
people have
God.
been super respectful in public. Maybe there might be a awkward, I'm running, and this is a like kind of a weird time to be asking for what you're asking for right now, but like I get it, and I'm sure I've fumbled my way through interactions with people that I found intriguing, inspiring, whatever. So I also, give total grace and benefit of the doubt across the board, and I understand that it's a full gift for somebody to
Mhm.
have that type of reaction if they see me in public. And as far as the sharing all of the things, to me, there's this, and it goes back to the core of a lot of what I've done. I remember this moment when I was a range boy at a golf course called Westchester Country Club. And we got invited to play after the range had closed. One of the members, who was like one of the cooler members, grabbed me and another one of the range guys and was like, "Hey, come, I'll be out there. Grab a couple carts and come play like 2 or 3 holes with me," which we thought was cool, just because a member like let us out on the course, so to speak.
Mhm.
And he
Well,
was
that
just,
course is gorgeous too, and
yes,
so to be able to play it is
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
that capacity is amazing.
totally. And he was always like the cooler, more relaxed of all of the members, drove a really cool Porsche. He was probably in his early 50s, if I had to guess. And was just always like that much more open and human with us than some of the others that were just like, very straightforward. And
You're just here.
yeah.
Thank you.
And at one point, the other guy said, "What's the secret? What's the secret to success?" And I'll never forget this. And it wasn't because of what he said, but it was because of how honest he was. And when he said it, he was like, you know, he's like, basically, in so many words, he said, just enjoy everything around you. I mean, he said basically like, all of the booze, drugs, women, and blah, 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 blah. But he said it in this like, and he was a single dude. So he wasn't like trying to be, too cool in the moment too. He was basically saying like, I just live my life. And there's, and it doesn't mean that because I'm a member here and that I've got this car and these other things, that I don't just go out and enjoy, and that I'm super restrictive with myself because now I'm an adult and I do. And I remember being like, wait a minute, that's not like, I would have expected that answer maybe from some sort of like rock star that I would have met, but like, I would not have expected that from a dude who I believe works in the finance industry in Westchester, New York. And like, I remember being struck of like, that was a very odd and very honest and like overly honest answer from this guy. And as I got into my career and started to like try to learn, how do you do all of these things? How do you balance all of these things? I always remember there being like, there's not a lot of real helpfulness in this space, and like easy to digest helpfulness too, where you get a sense of like, okay, well, how does my boss even manage his time, right? Like in a lot of cases, you don't know unless you sat down or unless you worked for a long time with somebody. What does their day structure actually look like? Like, how are they putting themselves in a position where, on top of all of the other things, they're walking into the 3 o'clock meeting and they're like, yeah, I read this deck. I have 200 questions. I'm ready to go. Like, let's go. And there's the obvious, you read the deck before you get to the meeting, but when? Like, how does your time get structured? Are you doing that on your commute? Or are you doing that at home? Like all of those. So to me, I almost feel like there's a opportunity in the overshare, so to speak, to just show it's not easy. You can control how you look at things when you're in the moment, but it's not easy to find the time to do all of those things. So to me, it was just a no brainer from a content perspective. It was like, I record myself during the day in snippets. I find a light-hearted approach to telling that story. I always say, for the most part, I say you instead of I, because I've always wanted to condone that these were things that other people can do. And it's not, I didn't love being like, and then I walked into the president's office and did blah, 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 blah. No, I actually wanted the viewer to think like, oh, especially as it relates to my career, like that could be me that walks into the president's office. And I've, for the longest time until they had the, issue with the music company that pulled half of their music from TikTok. The one thing that I had pinned on my page was a 15-second whatever, where I'm basically saying anything I can do, you can do better if you want to. And I really, really, really want to make sure that that is crystal clear. And as much of what I do is that I'm not, who cares about me as an individual? What's most helpful is you seeing things and, taking something away from it that can benefit you on a day-to-day basis. And that truly anything that I can do, the viewer can do better if they want to. And that's a choice, because I also know that there's a lot of people that just don't want to have to work 10, 12-hour days, which is 1,000% understandable. So, within all of it, it's just this like interesting balance of how can I help by wanting to help. That I think inevitably means you have to share more, because to explain to somebody what's the recipe for this, like you have to tell them all the ingredients. And then in some cases you have to show them how you're mixing them together. And that's fine, especially once I saw, and I never expected to see comments where it's like, I'm not as scared to grow up anymore, or I'm, that much more comfortable in my career. And some of the DMs I get through LinkedIn, especially, are nuts with how candid people are in return of like sharing the struggles that they've been through, or, how they got through this, excruciating period in their career because they just watched my stuff. And so to that also makes it worthwhile too, where it's like, at the end of the day, I still haven't done like a skincare routine post or anything along those lines. So yes, people know my schedule at a pretty high level, but I also haven't really spoken to the camera in God knows how long too, at least in like very small snippets here and there. So it feels like a decent balance, and I have no problem being this like open, because it's like, I am who I am. I can't change this. So you're cool with it and I can help you, or you're not, and that's fine too.
Well, I want to touch on the schedule thing, because there's some backlash sometimes about your 4 a.m. wake up or your 4:02 wake up.
Yep.
Which, is it still 4:02 now? Or are we at like, sometimes I'll see like 4:14?
It's
Are you
been
bumping it up a little bit?
It's
or
been
it's
all
over the
over.
place?
Yeah, it's been all over the place. Like today, it was probably 5:30. Had the alarm set. There's only so much I can do in my in-laws' basement right now. There's only so
Right.
much I can do in this house at different hours, and I am trying to be cognizant of the fact that I was burning the candle from a bazillion different ends for a super long period of time. So,
Yeah, burnout's a real thing.
right.
I mean,
So,
it's hard.
right. So, it's been everywhere from 4:02 to 5:30 these days.
So as far as the schedule, I think people really need to understand, anybody that's trying to hate on you about the 4 a.m. wake up, no, you're not telling people to do it. You're
Nope.
simply showing, this is how I fit all the things I want to do in the day, in my day, by adding this 4 a.m. wake up. Because for you, going on that run and doing that morning routine means something. It helps you get through the day. And so I think anybody that is hating on you for that wake up needs to understand no one's telling you to do it. If your routine makes you feel bad about, my routine, which I think for a little bit of a period of time, I thought like maybe I should wake up at 4 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
But it just wasn't congruent with or wasn't aligned with how I was living my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to really understand, like, Timm's not telling me that I have to wake up at 4 a.m. He's just showing me, hey, this is my schedule. This is how I do all the things in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so the feelings that I was feeling about feeling bad about not being able to wake up at 4 a.m., that's on me. That's not on Timm. So any of that backlash, I just hate, because it's like, you've never said to people, do this. You've simply just said, hey, this is what I do.
Yeah. And I get the other side too. I mean, thank you for saying that. I get the other side too of the, what do they call it? Like either toxic positivity or just like the over indulgence of, that type of hustle porn, I believe is another way that it's referred to.
Yeah, that's another. Yeah.
And I get it. But to your point, like, I'm not going to, you can overthink yourself into a corner about so much within any of these things, right? So I'm not going to go too crazy about like, oh, do I not show this? This is literally how the sausage gets made. So it is what it is. I'm not going to, if you don't like it, fine. And I would also say to anybody, and I'm sure that there's at this point has to be hundreds, if not thousands of people that would say like, oh yes, no, I've gotten that response from Timm, where people will send me a DM or they'll reach out to me in some other capacity, or they meet me in public and like, how do you wake up at 4? I really want to get, and the first thing I'll ask them is, why do you want to do that? Do you like, are you, because I think there can be this, and so I try to be cognizant of it. There can be this, oh, I need to be doing that thing, but why? Like I need to. I've got an 11-year-old girl. I've got a wife. I've got, especially when I had my job, I had all of these responsibilities, and I was hell bent on continuing to. And I was doing these things long before I ever made a piece of content on TikTok. This was just the way that I was able to get through my day. And it helped relieve anxiety for me because I felt that much more in control of things. But, I would always, first thing I would say to somebody is like, why do you want to do this? If you have a good reason as to why, then cool, I'll help you. But I'm not, I'm not even comfortable in a one-to-one conversation being like, this is what you do, because in 9 out of 10 cases, the person that's bringing this up doesn't have a kid, because it's, the audience, and especially through TikTok, is largely a younger demographic. And I'm like, if you don't have these other responsibilities, first thing you should do, if you're looking for more time to do, what are you looking for more time? What are you going to do with that time? If you're clear on that, and you can then look at the rest of your day and perhaps pull a half hour here to do something, pull a half hour there to add on to that, whatever that might be more useful versus like, cool, I have to get up earlier and then do what? Because if you just get up earlier and you're just like there, then go back to sleep. Like, take care of yourself. Be a normal 27-year-old. Be yourself. Don't try to force these things. So that's usually my response when somebody's like, hey, how do I do this? I'm like, why do you want to do it?
Well, what I try to explain to clients is you have to really sit down and decide, because clients will always say, well, I don't have time to shoot, or I don't have time to edit. And I would always say, like, the first thing that we're going to do is you're going to agree that you are a creator. You're no longer a consumer. You don't consume, you create. And then that really sort of lets them see how much time they were consuming content instead of creating it. And then all of a sudden, oh, I do have the time. And so I simply just started to tell people, think of yourself as a creator. You are no longer a consumer. You are only to post and engage with purpose. You post with purpose. And we are either solving a problem or entertaining or educating. That's when we open our mouths, right?
Yep.
And so informational, aspirational, and solving a problem. And so or inspirational, aspirational, and solving a problem. So that, I think, has helped my clients. And I'm finally taking my own advice, which is the hardest thing in this world of content creation, is like, I can tell you what to do. I think I've even sent you emails of like, hey, this was great. You should probably do this instead. And I'm like, looking at it of like, Timm would tell me to stop writing this email because I'm wasting my time. It's not on the to-do list today. And so that has really stuck with me of look at where my time wasters really are, right? I think because I have so much knowledge in production and producing and storytelling, I want to help everybody. But it's like, but Tim didn't ask for your help, right? Like this person didn't ask for your help. Are there people that are asking for my help? Yes. But I'm now getting better at saying, well, I do air check sessions that will cost you this much. I help create YouTube channels and my rate for that is this. I think for the longest time, I had a really hard time marketing myself and I was just doing everything for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I need my time to focus on also creating for me, for my own brand, I've pushed back. I've been saying no. And I think there's something really powerful in a no because that makes my yes just that much more meaningful.
Yeah, totally agreed. I get these DMs that especially on LinkedIn, I'm like, I can answer this question. It's a long-winded answer, but then I could end up spending 2 hours just going through and responding to people's DMs one-to-one, which is a lovely place to be and feels very almost altruistic. But at the same time, too, it's just not a smart way to try to figure all these things out. So, I think to your point, you need to have boundaries. I think once you're comfortable with the value you bring to any given conversation, then from there you can kind of unlock it further. And sometimes you do need to fumble through that awkward phase of like, I don't exactly know what to do with this, but this is where my brain goes, and kind of test that theory out in some ways that might not be the best use of time as somebody else might define it. But, you're like, okay, cool, because I did that because I sent that email to Tim, or I, spent that time responding to that LinkedIn message and got this response, then I know that this is helpful. And but that's why it's a bit of a process, especially as a, self-employed whatever, that you figure out what that value is and how do you do the proper combination, at least for me, which I think is the proper combination of, what are the things that I can do that are helpful at scale and that should be free, and then the things that, are going to help me sustain the lifestyle that I would like to for my family and I. And, I did this exercise where I created a pyramid of what are the different things that I bring to the table, from the most expensive, smallest population thing to the most people and the stuff that I should be doing pro bono. And then I try to like look at it that way and keep that in the back of my mind. It hasn't helped me like fully establish the new business model, but at least gave me food for thought relative to, yeah, I could do executive recruiting. I could 1,000% be brought in by an HR team somewhere to take a look at, hey, we're looking at these 3 candidates for this C-level position or for this, director level, whatever. And, from an emotional intelligence perspective, give us I've taken the classes to be able to help. But then there's also I can help you with just managing your email if you've never been in a corporate space before. And how do you not write something to somebody further up the food chain that's going to get you, run into a buzzsaw, things along those lines. And then you try to like organize all those thoughts and deploy the helpful perspective the right way. And that's a friggin' process. So I think you need to fumble through it in some of the ways that you're describing so that you can get to a place where you're like, oh, this just makes more sense now. And I learned some things along the way by just doing.
That's exactly what I'm doing. And also like, what do I really want to be doing? Right. So like, I sort of, again, fumble my way through it and try to really figure that out. I think you're doing the right thing though, by making it content, right? I mean, you're answering questions in your content and then creating it in that form so that more people that have that question can have it answered within the content spectrum, which I think helps you in the long run, because why are you going to answer the same question over and over again, right? Like collect those pain points and then address them. And then if somebody has a question, you can have a VA sit there and link the video where you address it over and over again if need be in the future. So I'm from New Jersey. I went to college in New York City. So Howard Stern was a part of my life. I mean, my dad would drive me to Catholic school and he would like sneak it on to see what was going on. And obviously, if it was too racy, it would be turned off. But I was a Howard Stern listener. So I know your dad, Timm Chiusano, was Howard Stern's GM. But when you talk about him, you sort of downplay it. You don't really mention Howard Stern. You say he was in radio sales. Is there a reason that you don't contextualize what he really did in the Howard Stern realm?
Yeah, it's not. It's what he did. I think as simple as that. Um, it's what my dad did. It doesn't. It's not what he does now. There's, I'm trying to be respectful of that space too. Like I have no idea. Like I don't want to bring Howard into the conversation or into a conversation that he doesn't want to be a part of. Right. So
Okay.
like, it's not my, there's, unless there was something super helpful that I could pull from specifically to say, hey, because my dad had this job X, Y, and Z, then it's, I don't know. There's nothing, there's not a there for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it could also like perpetuate some of the potential stigmas, either against me or in general, or it could discredit. It was, I'll see a lot of nepo baby comments, which is interesting, especially at 46. But I get it. People will see, somebody who had a dad who was in an industry and blah 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 blah. It makes perfect sense. And yeah, I mean, having grown up in a household where my dad was successful with his career, I mean, comes with perks. Like it's just it's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
way that it is. And super generous parents. I mean, my grandfather was my great grandfather was a fresh off the boat, $5 in his pocket kind of story. My grandfather was kind of close to that, where he ran out of money and had to drop out of NYU and just kind of had all kinds of different careers and made a very successful business person out of himself and raised 8 solid human beings, my dad being one of them. And my dad was one of the only folks that didn't go into the family business, which was a messenger service in New York City that
Wow.
the rest of the family got into. He found his way in radio sales, ended up being part of that Howard Stern era. I would argue my dad belongs in the Radio Hall of
Radio
Fame.
Hall of Fame.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yep.
100%. I absolutely agree with you.
But with all of that in mind, there's some other parts to the story as well, like my dad having stage 4 melanoma in '99. So, I think that was the year, and that cascading of events that in part impacted how I was trying to get my way through college at the time. The fact that when I left college, I didn't have a degree, lied to my parents about it because it was, 2000 or whatever. And I'm like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I also don't want to have the conversation that I don't want to do this anymore. Like my head's kind of after watching my dad go through stage 4 melanoma, survive as one of 85 that went through this crazy experimental chemotherapy. And on the other side of that, it was just like, I don't want to be in sales because I watched my dad do that his entire career, and I just don't want to do that. And I don't want to be in radio because I don't want any association with it. As a kid, it was like either a blessing or a curse. It was like people would see the association with Howard. And if you didn't like Howard, and Howard is a polarizing figure, so it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like, cool, everybody 2 thumbs up here. Like to your point about your dad being like, is this too racy or is this not? Some people just thought he was the scourge of the earth, right? So
Oh, yeah.
I had some
Yeah.
people that if they made the association would be like, oh, you're a scumbag. Like immediately they'd
Okay.
just be like, oh, because your dad is associated with him, that therefore you are a scumbag because you must find him funny and you must think his jokes are cool, blah, 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 blah. And so I had like, you either thought I was a scumbag, serious, you either thought I was a scumbag or you thought it was super cool. And if you thought it was super cool, you either wanted something from me, right? Can I tell you how many times during my high school and middle school computer,
I
like,
can't even
hey,
imagine.
when can I meet Howard? When's Howard going to be at your house? Can I come to the radio station? What can I meet Howard? Can you give me concert tickets? What can you do for me?
Well,
Right.
I
So
worked
it's
in
like,
radio, so that's all we get
right,
constantly is,
right,
I want to go see this. I'm like, I'm not the ticket master.
right,
Like, I
right,
can't
right.
do this for you. I get
And,
it.
if you were a friend of mine in high school, you saw all of the shows because I would always bring my closest friends to all of the events that I possibly could bring them to. But that's kind of the way. So it left this like kind of smaller
Mm-hmm.
group of folks that just knew me for me. and like those are my friends that are still in my text message thread. So,
Mhm.
for all of those reasons, there's just like, it's not, to me, it's not
You've
worth.
just kept it out of the narrative because it's
Yeah, I
not
mean, yeah, there's some
part.
amazing and hilarious stories that I could make TikToks out of, but I
Well,
don't
I mean,
know.
take your son to work day must have been insane, but
Well, luckily, what we had was career day, and so I had
Mhm.
friends that would go. And yes, there's some amazing stories of that. Like I have friends that would go, and they were, my dad would volunteer for a career day, so there'd be like two kids from my class that would go with my dad, and they would get pulled onto the show, and there were like some, amazing stories in those regards. But I'm very liberal when it comes to, if you're part of my life, you have to accept the fact that I'm probably going to tell a story about you or us or do something, and you're not going to get permission, or I'm not
Yeah.
going to ask for your permission ahead of time. When I made a video recently about this guy who lived with me in high school. His parents divorced, and they both left the town that we were living in, and you had to be a resident of the town to go to the high school. And I remember going to my parents and being like, Steve's parents are splitting up. They're not only splitting up, but they're both moving. Can Steve live with us so that he doesn't have to go to, another high school? My parents said yes. God knows why. They were like, yeah, cool. Let's bring this other kid, like a weird foreign exchange student. But they did. And so, he was one of the closest things I had to a brother along the way. And recently had a chance to spend a bit of time with him over, 2 or 3 days, which never happens anymore. And so I made a post about him, and I told all kinds of old stories and brought back old pictures. And there's not a chance I was going to be like, yo, Steve, are you cool with this? Like, no, that's just happening. And you're going to find it on the internet, and you're going to trust that my intentions are,
Mhm.
1,000% good here. So, with all those things in mind, it's like, uh, there's it's a part of my life. It's a part of my life I don't mind talking about, obviously, as I just kind of walk you through,
Mhm.
a whole bunch of the ins and outs there, but hasn't
I
been
also
relevant
I
from
just
TikTok yet.
I mean, I think it's obvious that you did this yourself. I mean, you started posting about your life. You create the stories that you're telling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you've really inspired me. And I have bins and bins of photos, and I'm like, God, I have so many stories. I don't think I've ever sat down and like really thought these stories can really help people. Of 20 plus years of doing this, of creating content just in different ways between TV, film, radio, and podcasting, like if content creation is this huge deal and more people want to start doing it, I know I can help people. I know I can help people tell their stories. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of times people think storytelling comes from ego. It's not. You're telling your story to help the person that needs to hear the story.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing it for other people. It's not from ego of to say like, look how amazing my life
Right,
is and look
right.
what I've done.
Yep.
It's so that people can relate to it and learn from it.
Yeah, totally
So I
agree.
love what you're doing, and I'm just sort of finally getting into it more and more. I liken it to like a child who, when the water at the ocean would come in and like kids would like run away from the water coming in, and the tide would go out and they would run back out to chase it.
Yep.
That's sort of the ebb and flow that I've been with content. And so now I'm more just like diving in and gonna do the thing that I've been dreaming of doing and doing it wholeheartedly and not be scared of how I'm perceived. I cannot control how I'm going to be perceived.
Right.
And so it's sort of been this freeing space to be in. Because I don't have that many followers, and definitely not even near as many as you do, I also have the privilege of creating in the dark, as they say, right? I can just be and do to share just because I want to share,
Mm-hmm.
and not really because anybody has any expectations of me.
Yep.
Do you sort of miss being that space of creating in the dark when you didn't have a lot of followers?
No, because I feel like I still have that to a certain extent. Like, YouTube, don't have a ton of people there. Podcast, don't have a ton of people there. Right. I think that everybody has an opportunity. I think, with very few exceptions of like the biggest, like truly the biggest on the planet, I think there's always an opportunity to create in the dark if you really wanted to. So I put it on myself to experiment and be cognizant of the fact that there's 1,000 different places where stuff can be put, and that's gives me all the opportunity to experiment and create in the dark, where it's like, cool, if this gets 150 views, then that's going to be successful based on the platform that it is, even if there's a million people over here, and not take that for granted yet. So I actually feel good about having that balance, that there isn't like too much everywhere. And especially now that I'm on my own and I can put stuff out there on LinkedIn that my coworkers, my old coworkers might either be like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. Or like, oh my God, I'm so excited that he did that. Um, it feels like it's still this perfect like experimentation phase of, you know, I don't care as much for a handful of reasons. I care more for a handful of reasons. And for both of those reasons, with my focus being pretty intentional these days about just doing things that I think are going to help people do their best work or make the most of their career simply by being the best version of themselves. Like I made my desktop background now just say something along the lines of, does it serve your purpose? And what that is intended to remind me on a consistent basis is what I'm doing, is what I'm creating actually going back to helping fulfill what I believe is my purpose now, which is I had to go through all of the years within corporate America and see all of this from a people management perspective of understanding why people get fired, understanding why process gets changed, understanding what happens in mergers, understanding what happens in the closed door sessions when people are trying to figure out there's a pandemic and what do we do about, scheduling and how is work from home being like. I've gone through all of that to now be here and say, here's some cheat sheets, here's some explanations as to how things happen behind. So to me, that helps clarify things regardless if the platform is 1 million people or 150 people. It all kind of needs to go back to that. At the same time, allow myself to be clumsy and experiment from a creativity perspective. And then I just try to make the most of the fact that there are 1 million people in some places and there's just a couple of hundred or a few thousand in other places, and they're both a gift.
Well, it's been neat trying to see you figure it all out. You started your podcast a certain way. It felt like it didn't align with the way you wanted to do it, at least when I was listening. So you sort of shifted the way you did things, but you don't explain it. You make no apologies for it. You just try the next best thing that feels right. And then the way the YouTube channel is going, I love that you are just experimenting, right? You don't know until you try. And with content creation, I liken it to, you can't get the experience without the job. You can't get the job without the experience, right? Like you don't really know what kind of a content creator you are. There's different ways to do this. And so I love that you're not scared to try. To be consistent and then keep going. Was there a conscious shift in the podcast format? Am I right in that the way you started it seemed to fit a certain format, but you didn't feel aligned with it, and that's why you're doing it differently now?
I'd like to say that I'm that well thought through that the answer would be yes there, but the answer is, as I was handling the full-time job plus all of the other things, that was always a place where it felt comfortable for me to use that format because I am legitimately long-winded by nature. And it made sense, but it was also the last on the rung of like stuff to do, to carve out the time to set it up the right way. And it was the only place that until recently I wasn't entirely familiar with full soup to nuts production. Right? TikTok is super easy. You go in, you can record straight into the thing, and you can post straight from the thing. Same with just about every other platform. Like there's not a lot of like steps to go to put it in the wild. Podcasting is different because unless you know, or unless you take the time to strategically set it up, recording is not happening on the same platform that is going to inevitably like push it everywhere, and then to like have it set up so that it pushes everywhere. Like it's not a ton of work, but it requires work and knowledge. And it was just something that from a bandwidth perspective, I was not prioritizing. So had somebody that approached me way back when said, hey, I think this is a great platform for you. I said, I 1,000% agree because I love one-on-one meetings. And I think that this is an opportunity to do that at scale. We did a handful together. He had some situations happen in his life that made helping me not the priority in the short term. So went away because I'm like, I don't even own the credentials to all of these places now. So I don't even know how to get into this thing, and started it back up, probably tried too hard with this is how it's going to get recorded in the basement. And I worked with somebody that had a brilliant vision for where it could go, but it was just going to take too long, I thought, to get to that place. And also didn't feel like prioritizing scheduling interviews and all the other logistics that I know are a
That's a lot.
challenge. Yeah. So once I learned, like, oh, here's what I do, here's my process now, I can go, I'm going to record on a Tuesday morning. I'm going to, now I know that now I can handle all of it. I actually edit my last 3 podcasts I've done. I've edited in iMovie because that's where I edit all of my stuff. I just dump it in with a, big black, background on top of it. So I can cut the audio at least a little bit and change the levels and spend maybe 15 minutes in it, and put it out the door. So it's been, like everything else, it's just an iterative process. And I'm trying to not get too hung up on how is it going or what's happening with it. I know that I probably still need to do another 100 YouTube videos until I get to a place where I'm like, cool, I've got this kind of figured out now. I probably need to do another 100 podcasts, and that's like 2 years worth of work, right? So, if I'm doing one of these things, for both of those on a weekly basis, I got time, and I got work in front of me, and I'm
Right.
cool with just let me go and shovel some stuff and see what happens.
You could also record video, edit it in iMovie, and then you can roll it off of iMovie just as an audio file.
Yeah, no, that, I mean,
So,
that's
if you
that's
want to merge the two, the YouTube channel and the podcast eventually, there's ways that you can do that. But again, I'm giving you advice you didn't ask for.
yeah. And actually, and I actually have a super specific response to that, which is when I download the file, because I use Riverside as well. When I download the files, it's a much smaller file to just download the audio. And so when I just dump that over,
just easier.
Takes up less space, and then I don't I don't know. It just it's made it easier, and I'm also very cognizant of the fact that I'm going to be pretty clumsy with it, and if I don't overthink it and just keep it to the bare minimum of what does it take to get from, okay, I sat down and I spoke out loud, and now what do I do with it? And to do that consistently, again, especially as a one-man band, because I am doing, to your earlier point, all of this by myself with the exception of YouTube editing. It's just the way that it works for me right now.
Well, yeah. What's your minimum viable output?
Exactly.
And that was my biggest issue.
Exactly.
It took me forever to finally just start outsource editing for my own stuff, because I was just like, I'm not getting to it. It was frustrating me. And if it meant, if it's something that I loved, I needed to make the time and put the money into it. I know we're at an hour. I'm just looking through what other things I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you why the extra M in Tim. I don't know if there's a short answer for that.
Super short answer. The extra M in Tim is because it's my grandmother's maiden name. Her name was Elda Timm, and Timm is apparently a super common German last name, or at least it was for a minute. And I am one of 3 or 4 Tims in the larger family between my mom's side and my dad's side. So it's actually a family name.
I love that. And then how do you know old time hockey? Did you guys play hockey together, or how did that collaboration happen? How do you know him?
Through the DMs. 2022, I would assume, I think. I remember getting him, when he showed up on my radar back in the early TikTok days, like everybody else was, initially infatuated with, wow, what an amazing world this guy's crafted, and just being so curious about all the things. And then I got a follow back one day, and I remember being like, how crazy, we couldn't be more different in so many ways. And we started to be friends through the DMs, and it became very clear very quickly they were actually basically the same person in a lot of regards. And I invited him to come to New York back in March of 22, I think it was, as hey, let me just throw this out there. I don't think it's actually going to happen, but let me just throw this out there. And we were just exchanging voice memos as DMs. And I literally said, hey, buddy, I got an extra ticket to the Rangers versus the Islanders next week. If you happen to be in New York, we'd love to have you. And he was like, hey, I think I'm going to come. And then, and it was funny. My wife was like, wait a minute, what did you do? I'm like, this guy's coming to New York. And she's like, what? She's
Total stranger off the internet.
She's like, where is he staying?
But then did you show her his videos? Come on.
I did.
He's amazing.
Yes. But at the same time too, there was where is he staying? What,
Right. What do you mean?
Right. and does he really live by himself in the cedar swamp? And if so, like, is he going to stay downstairs in our guest room? And like, what does this all look like? And so we set that up. He came out to the game, and I remember, like, I got him. He didn't know, he'd never been in New York City before. It was like the sweetest encounter in person, to meet him for the first time in person outside of Madison Square Garden, to go to a game with
So
him.
cute.
And it was literally him, my wife, my dad, my daughter, and one of my friends from high school. And we watched this game together. And he's always been bigger than me from a follower perspective, but to get like people that kept coming over and being like, this is the craziest thing to see the two of you like in real life sitting here like watching the game. And then we've stayed super close friends. Like, I'll put it this way, with some of the challenges and some of the places where you're like, I need to have a real conversation with somebody right now about some of the broader challenges, especially from like a mental health perspective in this space. He's probably one of the top 2 or 3 people that I'm reaching out to outside of my wife or my parents.
I love that. He's here in Michigan. So like he's one of my dream creators that it's like I would love, because I could drive to him. I would love to follow him for a day and just like watching him create content and do it behind the scenes and talk to him about it. So if you could put a good word in, not that you owe me anything, but I would love to be able to talk to him and just really follow him in person, because I just think he's one of my favorite content creators. The way he holds space for people is just such a beautiful thing, especially during COVID. It's like you always felt like you had a friend. Thank you, Timm Chiusano, for everything. Thank you for holding space for me. Thank you for saying yes to this. I'm sure you get thousands of requests, and I truly appreciate that. You said yes and you meant the yes. I don't know that a lot of people would do that, especially with somebody like me with such a small YouTube subscriber count.
My pleasure.
For now. So we're excited for the book. If people want more information about you, timmchiusano.com, Tim with 2 M's, right? Are you active on the website, or how do people get more info? Just follow you on TikTok and Instagram?
Yeah, I don't even know what my URL is. I think it's actually
I'll put it in the description.
It's like tim.work or something along those lines. But
okay.
Yeah, Instagram, TikTok, that's, if you're curious, those are the best
I'll put
places.
all the links in the descriptions. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Stay right there. Don't go anywhere.